Before the first city rose, before crowns were forged, before men called upon gods, there was one, Eledumare, unseen, unshaken, beyond time. But in the hunger of creation, others rose, gods carved from men's fears, spirits shaped by blood, and powers that fed on worship. They ruled in shrines, in forests, in oceans, in temples of stone and sacrifice. Kingdoms bent to them. Kings wore their marks. Blood paid their price. Yet even gods weaken when their names fade from men's lips. Their thrones cracked, their altars grew cold, and the world forgot them. But not all. From hidden unions came children, half-bloods, Nephilim, who wore the strength of gods, yet walked as men. And in silence, they plotted to reclaim the world through law, wealth, and war. Then came Mepha, a shadow dressed in progress, a council cloaked in democracy, a machine built to choke the rising of vessels, the chosen mortals marked by Eledumare himself. And in Lagos, where shadows breathe and temples sleep beneath highways, the war began again, not of tribes or nations, but of thrones, seen and unseen. This is the story of crowns broken, gods forgotten, and men remade. This is the story of vessels and the thunder that comes for all. The sky was a vast cathedral, silent and endless, painted in hues no mortal eye had ever beheld. Beyond the reach of storms, beyond the rhythm of time, Eledumare stood. The air here did not move, yet it pressed upon the world with the weight of eternity. The wind that touched his brow carried no scent of earth, no whisper of blood or dust. It was the wind before creation, the breath that lingered when the first word was spoken. He watched. Below him, Lagos sprawled like a restless body in fever. Its heartbeat was the thunder of traffic, its sweat the restless lights blinking nervously in the night. Skyscrapers rose like jagged teeth, clawing at a heaven they could never reach. Beneath them, gods wore the masks of men, and men dared to play at being gods. In shadowed alleys and candlelit shrines, ancient bloodlines stirred. Invisible wars bled into the streets. Eledumare's gaze was not bound by distance. He saw the cracked church in Surulere, where prayers rose like smoke, unanswered. He saw the statue in Yaba, weeping red. He saw the boy in Oshodi, the vessel, marked and trembling beneath a burden he did not yet understand. Each scene flickered before him like flames consuming dry parchment. Yet Eledumare did not speak, he only watched. For he knew time itself bent toward his decree. The storm had not yet broken, but when it did, the earth would tremble with the memory of his name. Eledumare's gaze lingered where faith had faltered. In Surulere, the prophetess crawled across the broken tiles of her church, her knees bleeding, her voice hoarse from prayers that seemed to rise only to strike the ceiling and fall back in silence. Once, her words had drawn healing like rivers. Once, her prophecies had made kings tremble. But now, she felt nothing, only a cold shoulder from the heavens, as though the throne had turned away. She wept, not just for herself, but for a nation drowning in unanswered cries. Further north, in Yaba,
The crowd had scattered in terror when the statue of Ogun split from crown to chin, blood trickling down its stony face. Some whispered it was a sign of judgment, others a trick of desperate priests. But on the dark edges of the internet, forums burned with talk of something greater, a crack in the divine order itself. And deeper still, in the bustling chaos of Oshodi, a boy stood at the crossroad of destiny. His chest bore the invisible seal of the Creator, though his hands trembled with fear. He was not chosen by men, not raised by ritual. He was soil in which a hidden seed had been planted, the vessel. But even as heaven moved in secrecy, earth groaned under the rise of a darker order. The Nephilim, children of ancient unions between gods and mortals, walked the earth clothed in democracy, diplomacy, and wealth. They sat in parliaments, drafted constitutions, funded research labs, and whispered into microphones that shaped nations. Their creation, Project One, now reborn as Mifa, was no longer rumor. It was law. It was power. What the world celebrated as progress was in truth the tightening of a noose around the neck of the divine. And Eledumare saw it all.
From his high place above the clouds, Eludumare's eyes pierced time like a blade. He had seen empires rise on the backs of gods and collapse when their altars crumbled. But now, what unfolded was unlike any age before. The gods were weakening. Not just their forms, their very essence was unraveling. He felt it in the thinning of incense smoke, in the fading of chants, in the silence of temples that once thundered with sacrifice. Their names, once carved into the bones of nations, were dissolving on the lips of men. Hashtags now replaced hymns. Currencies replaced prayers. Men bowed more often before glowing screens than sacred shrines. Even those who still called on the ancient ones did so with half belief, their hearts already bought by modern idols. The Nephilim thought themselves clever, preserving their bloodlines through secret unions, consolidating their strength in Mepha's machine of control. Yet Eludumare saw their desperation. Their rebellion was not born of power, but of fear. They had already lost heaven's favor, already slipped from the memory of eternity. What they fought for was survival, a prolonging of names destined to vanish. Still, their schemes were dangerous. Mepha's policies, disguised as progress, struck at the heart of the vessels. Censorship muzzled missionaries. Surveillance tracked every whisper of prophecy. Laws stripped away the freedom to gather, to preach, to even pray in public. The war vessels were hunted, targeted not only by bullets, but by public perception, painted as extremists standing in the way of modern civilization. Eludumare's gaze grew heavy. He had broken thrones before oceans had tides. He had shattered crowns before fire had a name. Yet now he waited, for the war that was coming would not be won with raw strength, but with obedience. Timing was everything, because he knew what none of them did. The throne of heaven was not silent. It was watching, and soon its voice would thunder again.
The city below writhed like a restless beast. Lagos was never truly silent, not in the day and certainly not in the night. Even at midnight, it pulsed with restless energy. Traffic still clogged the highways like veins stuffed with blood. Neon lights blinked across Victoria Island, seducing with false promises of wealth. In Oshodi, bodies pressed together in markets that never slept, trading more than goods, trading gossip, secrets, even whispers of fear. Eledumare stepped down from the heights of eternity and hovered unseen over this sprawling body of noise and sin. To the people below, nothing changed. They went about their chaos, unaware that the eye of heaven watched. But those with spiritual sight felt it. Somewhere in Surulere, a prophetess shivered in her sleep. In Yaba, a child jolted awake, convinced that the ground itself was trembling. The city groaned, sensing the weight of something greater descending. Eledumare's feet did not touch the earth, but every step he took rippled through the fabric of reality. Air bent around him. Time paused briefly with each movement, only to stutter forward again. He moved through streets unseen, yet leaving behind a silence heavy enough to make dogs stop barking, to make owls abandon their night calls. For the city was about to change. A storm had been seeded. Mifa had planted their agents in banks, in parliaments, in churches disguised as shepherds of light. The Nephilim walked as men, shaking hands in backroom deals, smiling before cameras, passing laws that choked the soul of the people. And though Lagos roared like a king, Eledumare knew it was a wounded beast, and wounded beasts were always dangerous. He stopped at the edge of Third Mainland Bridge, staring down at the dark water. For a moment, the waves shimmered unnaturally, reflecting not the skyline, but glimpses of other realms, mountains of fire, endless deserts of glass, temples that had crumbled to dust, signs of the worlds beyond bleeding into the present. Eledumare breathed deeply. The air carried the stench of blood, blood already spilled, blood yet to come. And with that, he whispered to the wind, not as a threat, but as a prophecy. Soon, Lagos will remember the one above all. The wind carried the words across the lagoon, across the slums, across the skyscrapers, into the ears of those chosen to hear. The storm was coming.
In the secret chambers of influence, far from the cries of the poor and the dust of the streets, the Nephilim gathered. They were no longer hiding in caves or whispering in ancient tongues. They wore Italian suits, sat in marbled halls, and held passports that could open any border. The world saw them as philanthropists, presidents, scientists, and prophets. But behind their polished smiles lay the blood of gods not meant to walk the earth. Their symbol was everywhere, yet hidden in sight lane. A curved sigil of 3 intersecting lines burned onto the chest of their chosen, etched into bank seals, embedded in the logos of corporations. To the unknowing, it was just design. To those who could see, it was rebellion. It was Mefa. In the heart of Abuja, within a skyscraper that never appeared on official maps, their council convened. Around the obsidian table, they spoke in languages older than man, though their lips seemed to move in English. Plans were laid with precision. Project 1 had failed to remain secret, but its rebirth as Mefa gave them new strength. Their agenda was clear: silence the vessels, strangle their faith, and corrupt their ranks from within. Okun, the rising star of politics, stood at the center. His eyes gleamed with something beyond ambition, something not wholly human. "The elections will be ours," he said calmly. "The people already love me. They see a savior in me. What they don't know is that their savior will never serve the I Am."
The council nodded. Some smiled. One leaned forward and whispered words that curdled the very air. Once Lagos bows, the world will follow. And in that moment, the walls trembled faintly, not with earthquake, but with the silent protest of creation itself. The earth knew what its stewards had forgotten. Men were not meant to worship false gods forever.
Bibire's knees had grown used to the cold floor, but his heart had not grown numb. Every prayer felt like lifting a mountain with trembling hands. He was tired, not just in body, but in soul. His Bible lay open before him, its pages marked with tears more than ink. The words still burned with truth, but each verse seemed to demand more than he felt capable of giving. He had buried too many brothers. The vessels were dwindling, not because their faith had failed, but because the cost of carrying that faith was unbearable. Some had been shot in the streets, others poisoned quietly. Entire churches, once filled with singing, now stood abandoned shells marked with bullet holes and ash. Yet still, Eldumare's whisper had come. Stand, do not break. That night, Bibire dreamed, or perhaps it was more than a dream. He saw himself standing in a desert of broken glass, the sky cracked open, and from the breach a light poured forth. Eldumare's voice rolled like thunder, yet it spoke in tenderness. Do not look at what is lost, look at what is coming. You are marked, Bibire, not for despair, but for fire. Through you my word will stand against the Nephilim. Through you Mifa will stumble. He woke with sweat on his brow and fire in his bones. He pressed his hand against his forehead, feeling the seal there, glowing faintly even in the darkness. The mark was a target, yes, but it was also a weapon. He rose from his knees. The fear had not vanished, the grief had not disappeared, but something stronger now pressed him forward. Obedience. And obedience was heavier than fear.
The day of Okun's swearing in was dressed in celebration. Lagos was electric. Streets clogged with jubilant supporters. Banners of victory stretched from rooftops to bridges, and television stations broadcast his rise as if the heavens themselves endorsed him. Children waved flags with his smiling face, while mothers prayed blessings over the man who had promised relief, wealth, and dignity. But beneath the sheen of human joy, the air was heavy with something far older. Invisible forces swirled. The Nephilim gathered in silence, hidden in plain sight. Dressed as senators, dignitaries, and advisors, they sat in the front rows of the ceremony, their eyes glowing faintly when the cameras weren't watching. Each of them bore the secret mark of Mepha, carved deep into their spirits. When Okun raised his right hand to take the oath, he did not swear by the Constitution alone. His lips moved with words the world could not hear. Ancient syllables, forbidden since Babel, carried upward like smoke. A shadow rippled behind him, unseen by the masses, but felt in the pit of the earth. The crowd erupted in cheers. The anthem roared. Fireworks cracked the skies. Yet, in that very moment, Iledumare, watching from above, spoke only one word: counterfeit. Okun lowered his hand, his smile unbroken. His eyes glittered like obsidian, deep and merciless. Lagos cheered for a savior, but heaven marked him as an impostor. From that day onward, every law, every decree he made would be a noose tightening around the necks of the vessels, and Mepha had found its king.
It began not with a trumpet, but with silence. 3 weeks into Okun's presidency,
A curfew was declared in Lagos under the guise of public safety. MIFA agents patrolled the streets in armored trucks, scanning faces with devices that could sense the faintest flicker of divine marks. Those who carried Eludumare seal, the missionary vessels, the war vessels, were dragged from their homes in the dead of night. The first strike happened in Mushin. A dozen vessels were gathered in a secret prayer house when the walls shook violently. MIFA stormed in, with weapons glowing with unholy fire, their bullets tipped with fragments of fallen stars. The vessels fought back, their hands blazing with light, voices echoing ancient psalms that cracked the air. But this was no ordinary raid. Among the MIFA soldiers stood a figure taller than the rest, skin marked with luminous scars, eyes burning red. A Nephilim general. With a single sweep of his arm, he hurled 3 war vessels through concrete walls, their bodies crumpling like paper. Yet even in chaos, something stirred. Bibire entered, his face calm, his hands raised. Light radiated from him, not blinding, but resolute. His voice was steady. "You think we are broken, but this is only the beginning. Heaven has not abandoned us." The Nephilim laughed, the sound like grinding stone. "Then let heaven save you now." The clash erupted, light against shadow, flesh against spirit. For the first time, the war was no longer hidden in whispers or politics. It had spilled into the streets, visible for all. And Lagos trembled.
The battle spread like wildfire. By dawn, Mushin, Surulere, and Yaba were smoldering battlegrounds. Ordinary citizens huddled in fear as unseen forces tore through their neighborhoods, walls split by invisible claws, streets lit by bursts of celestial flame. Lagos, the restless beast, had finally begun to roar. Bibire stood in the heart of it, battered yet unyielding. His body bore wounds that would have killed any mortal, but the mark on his forehead still burned bright, a seal of divine endurance. Around him, fallen vessels lay in silence, their lifeless hands still clutching fragments of prayer. Each body was a weight on his spirit, each death a reminder that this war was not won by strength alone. Then the Nephilim general returned, towering, relentless, with the MEFA sigil blazing on his chest. He raised a spear forged from shadow itself, and the sky darkened at its command. Bibire knew what it meant. This was not a mere skirmish, it was a declaration of annihilation. He fell to his knees, not in defeat, but in surrender. His lips moved, barely audible, whispering words older than time. Elidumare, if my blood must be the bridge, let it flow. His mark on his forehead ignited, searing white, brighter than the sun. His body trembled as divine fire coursed through him. For a moment, even the Nephilim stepped back, shielding his eyes from the brilliance. Then Bibire rose, his voice now no longer his own. Thunder spoke through him, and the ground quaked as if Lagos itself bore witness. "Enough," he said, every syllable shaking heaven and earth. "This war ends not in shadows, but in truth." He knew what must follow, his final stand, the sacrifice that would shatter the grip of MEFA and awaken every vessel across the world. And with a steady breath, Bibire stepped forward, ready to become more than a man. He would become the spark.
The clash came not with blades or bullets, but with light. When Bibire stepped forward, the mark on his forehead blazed so fiercely that the night sky over Lagos split in two. Darkness tried to swallow him, but the radiance within him outshone every shadow. The Nephilim roared, driving his spear downward with all the strength of fallen gods. Yet the weapon dissolved in midair.
melting like wax before the fire of Eledumare's breath. Every vessel still alive, whether hiding in fear, bleeding on the ground, or chained in secret cells across the city, felt the surge. Their marks glowed, responding to the flame of Bibire's sacrifice. The weak found strength, the broken found courage, the silent found their voice. Even the heavens stirred, thunder rolling without clouds, lightning dancing across a sky no storm commanded. Bibire lifted his hands. His body could no longer contain the weight of the divine. His skin cracked with fire, his voice resounding with eternity itself. This is the end of your reign, not by power, nor by politics, but by the hand of the one above all. With those words, his form burst into pure brilliance. The explosion was not destruction, but deliverance. The wave of light swept through Lagos, through Nigeria, through the world, searing away the enchantments of Metha, exposing every lie, every hidden Nephilim, every corrupted throne. Their disguises fell, their power broke. When the radiance finally faded, only silence remained. Where Bibire had stood was no body, no grave, only ash shaped like a kneeling man, and in its center, a single Bible unburned. Its pages fluttered in the wind, though there was no breeze. All who witnessed it, vessels, citizens, even trembling Nephilim, knew the truth. The war was not over, but its tide had turned. The gods had weakened, the Nephilim had fallen, Metha had been pierced. And in the echoes of thunder, one voice lingered across the heavens. I am. Eledumare's war had ended not in shadows, but in thunder, not with defeat, but with remembrance. The world would never forget.
That's the end of this chapter, but the journey isn't over yet. More epic stories are on the way, and you don't want to miss them. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, tap the notification bell, and join our growing community. For those who are watching but not subscribed, don't wait. The next chapter might just be the best one yet. See you soon!